Finally, Boruto's Karma activates. Is it Momoshiki time? No intro, straight to the point. The spoiler begins with Inojin training a new jutsu like crazy at Kashin Koji and Boruto's hideout, preparing for the upcoming battle against the insects. Yep, Mamushi. In short, Boruto is impressed after seeing Inojin master a jutsu in just one day. But here's what you need to know. At this point, with that serious look on his face, Inojin makes it clear that he's here for Konoha and Himawari. Meaning, indirectly, he's saying that this does not mean he forgives Boruto for betraying the village, and it doesn't mean he accepts Boruto as a comrade either. But you know what Boruto says in response? Yeah, that also applies to Inojin. In other words, if he ever makes Himawari cry, even once, Boruto threatens to shave his head completely bald. Damn, that's honestly hilarious. However, because of the situation, we know that not everyone is aware of who Boruto really is. Inojin looks quite confused and doesn't understand what Boruto means. Even Kashin Koji doesn't give any response, but yeah, Boruto immediately leaves instantly using Hiraishin. Then the scene shifts to an interrogation room. And as you can see in the middle of the interrogation, Mitsuki, who is suspected of being affiliated with Boruto, is also dragged into this problem. And yeah, since it's Mitsuki's turn now, Lord Kobu allows Konohamaru to leave the room and continue his duty. But at the same time, Sai is seen trying to connect to the sensor unit. It turns out that Sai wants to track Konohamaru's recent communication history involving a third party. More precisely, he wants to track what happened in the last few minutes. But somehow, despite the recent communication between Konohamaru and Shikamaru, the sensor unit reports to Sai that there are no records or history for the last few minutes. Then, now about Mitsuki. In short, Lord Kobu confirmed Mitsuki's identity as the child of the infamous Orochimaru. And without further ado, Lord Kobu already knew that Mitsuki was the person closest to him. Especially when Boruto escaped, Lord Kobu wanted to ask him a few things. But before that, the scene shifts to show Boruto with his new sword. In short, it turns out that the sword was completed faster than we thought. Some damage was successfully repaired, including maximizing its power and sharpness. And in this leak, the leaker mentions that it is a blade cloak. And something that makes it special is that once Boruto grips the hilt and activates the technique, the blade will automatically maintain the jutsu on its own. But something that cannot be taken lightly is that the sword absorbs the user's chakra. However, according to Sumire herself, there's no need to worry about it. Therefore, Boruto doesn't need to focus any concentration to maintain the technique. Since Hagoromo's effect operates independently, the technique will remain active as long as the user's chakra persists. And what I find most interesting is that if someone whose chakra is not registered touches the sword, it will drain a large amount of their chakra. So in other words, Sumire programmed the sword to be used only by Boruto and Sasuke. And of course, this is a security measure in case the enemy manages to seize it. But on the other hand, for work purposes, Sumire has also registered her chakra on the sword. And finally, Sumire built the sword with special materials integrated into it. Then the scene shifts to the Hokage's office where we see a dialogue between Shikamaru and Shikadai. In short, Shikamaru gives his son information about an attack from the Divine Tree Man and that Konoha will become the battlefield. So at this point, Shikamaru wants Shikadai to carry out the operation. But on the other hand, Shikadai suspects that his father is on Boruto's side because he assumes that the information his father told him came from Boruto. But no matter how much Shikadai blames Boruto with any accusations, Shikamaru insists that it is based on his heart's conviction and, of course, based on what the 7th Hokage did. So, in conclusion, to protect Konoha, Shikamaru follows his own convictions and makes the decisions he thinks are necessary. And of course, in facing the Divine Tree humans, Boruto's cooperation is absolutely essential. Shikamaru even tells his son that if he can't accept it, it's okay. He doesn't have to participate in this operation. It's not an order. But in the end, Shikadai accepts the order and the operation. However, before we find out what to do in this operation, the scene shifts to the hideout. In short, first, Inojin wanted Kashin Koji to provide and explain some more detailed information. But instead of explaining in detail, Kashin Koji gave an example and a question. If Inojin knew that he would die when fighting Jura for Himawari, would he still go ahead and face Jura? According to Kashin Koji, if Inojin had known beforehand, he might have hesitated and even been unable to move. As a result, if Inojin had survived because of his hesitation to fight Jura and had not faced Jura, would Himawari's power really have awakened? In the end of the day, Koji explained what he meant. Whatever future, no matter how little he tells someone about, it will change even the most little things. So simply put, the more ideal the outcome of a future is, the better it is if people don't know about it. Because even something they convey with good intentions can become a trigger that causes events to develop in an undesirable direction. However, on the other hand, there is a very terrible scene in the future. Eida becomes a tree and Himawari dies. Yeah, that's at least the glimpse of the future that we got in this leak. And of course, at this point, Kashin Koji intends to change the future where Eida or even Himawari dies, and we return to Konoha. In the midst of the situation where Mamushi is about to arrive in the village, Shikamaru, through Shindenjin, delivers information to all the ninja. However, this time the transmission will not be recorded and is considered unofficial. This also means that everyone who hears his voice right now is counted as a member of this operation. In short, Shikamaru explains that for those who are hostile toward Boruto, they need to put that issue aside for this battle. In other words, even though Konoha considers Boruto a threat who should be eliminated, Shikamaru cannot ignore the fact that Boruto's role is greatly needed. Therefore, Shikamaru asks them to support Boruto's movements in the village while remaining vigilant against enemy threats. As for the transmission Shikamaru just used, it's Inojin's newest jutsu called Shindenjin. Furthermore, Shikamaru also provided some important points about the abilities and strength of the enemy who will come to Konoha named Mamushi. He is a divine tree human who has the ability to split himself into many bodies. Additionally, it seems he can erase his own chakra traces, making it impossible for the village's chakra detection network to track him. That's why Inojin's new jutsu, Shindenjin, is so important. And a simple explanation: they are using a long-range communication technique similar to mind transmission, but a more advanced version called Shindenjin. The difference? Everyone connected via Shindenjin acts as a receiver, signal receiver. They can sense the vibrations from objects or living beings around them. Every object has a unique vibration frequency. Since regular chakra sensing couldn't locate the Mamushi, they used a new method, detecting Mamushi's vibration frequency to track its location and number. At this point, Inojin and Shikamaru also possess the ability to detect the position and number of enemies. However, Shindenjin has its limitations. In other words, not many people can connect simultaneously, which is why the team is selected with a limited number of members. However, before Shikamaru explains how to counter Mamushi's ability, the scene shifts to the center of Konoha village. Shortly after, we see Mamushi, who is already in the village searching for Eida, asking several people there about Eida's location. Of course, Inojin, who sees this movement, immediately reports it to Shikamaru. And just like the previous strategy, Shikamaru informs them of Mamushi's location. The person chosen to execute Mamushi is Boruto. Using the Hiraishin technique, he teleports and flies to the location Shikamaru has informed him of. But before that, the scene shows clear panic on Eida's face. Of course, Damon tries to calm his sister down, telling her not to worry. And at the same time, Shikamaru spreads information to several key points where Mamushi might appear, assigning it to various ninja and teams. And of course, this happens just as Kawaki moves in to support Boruto in the middle of his battle against Mamushi. And yeah, when Mamushi was trying to locate Eida, suddenly Boruto instantly appeared and brutally slashed Mamushi in a single strike. However, because Mamushi's bodies are divided into so many of them, Boruto is attacked from behind at the same moment. Unfortunately, after searching through several leak sources, the scene only ends here. But one thing is certain, and very important. The leaker mentioned that at the end of the chapter, Boruto uses his karma. And once again, since this is a leak, there are bound to be some inaccuracies or mistakes. So we'll continue this on the 19th. So yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the Boruto Chapter 28 review. Bye-bye. Data bio.